Come on, people, I need ideas. Opportunities like this don't come along very often.
What are you talking about? Bradley goes on work trips all the time.
Yeah, though I can't imagine what he does out there.
Writing, I assume.
True. It's the only thing he's good at.
Good one.
All of that aside, this is our chance to take over the podcast.
Good idea, Finton. Let's rename it to the Pumped Up Podcast.
Let me guess, Arnold. You're going to talk about working out.
Wow! How did you guess? You must be super smart.
No, I was thinking we could change the show to something more elegant.
We can call it the Precious Podcast.
We could have so many episodes about the Precious.
Not bad, but it feels a little limited in scope. I do appreciate the idea. Anyone else?
Perhaps we could do a podcast about the world of the backyard.
You just want to talk about the dogs, David.
Indeed. What if we just stop doing podcasts? It's not like any of this matters.
Ah, looks like Voidy is still in his nihilism phase.
Hey, guys, just packing for my trip. Everybody good in here? What? Oh, yes, of course. Everything's just dandy. Okay, well, I'm gonna go record the podcast here before my flight tomorrow.
Ah, yes, very good. Go record that Saved as Devine podcast.
It's, Saved as Draft, Finton.
Right, yes, of course.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 53 of the Saved as Draft podcast. This is going to be one of those weird episodes where I have to trim things down to fit into my schedule this week. I'm once again being called out to the western lands of California, so I will be out of my home office all week. Now, I could just skip the podcast on weeks like this, but we both know that's not how I do things. So, while this episode won't be fully packed like normal, I'm hoping to give you a few reasons to hang out with me anyway. This week, we're going to dive straight into the weekly interview, which is a weird one. Since I won't have time to schedule an interview with a new guest this week, you're going to hear from me. Sarah Rush, the prompt goddess herself, will be asking me questions submitted by the community last week. It's a really fun interview, and since it's on my schedule, I was able to record it over the weekend before I had to travel. When it comes to our other segments like the community spotlight, shoutouts, writing discussion, indie release radar, Wandering Prompt Awards, and the power-up prompts, rest assured, those will all be back next week. As a result, this latest power-up prompt from this past Saturday is open all the way until next Friday, January 30th. It's poetry this time around, so feel free to check it out and submit. You got plenty of time. It's the last power-up prompt that we'll do before Flash Fiction February begins as well. All right, that's housekeeping out of the way. Let's dive into this week's interview right after a quick word from this week's sponsor. You didn't think I'd leave that out, did you? Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by Minute Trips. Get where you're going faster than ever and with minimal side effects. Hey, you okay, bud? What? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Just a nervous transporter. I hear you. I was nervous the first few times I took a transport, but hey, it beats flying, right? Yeah, I suppose it does. Next! Hey there.
Hey, welcome to Minute Trips. A new form of travel brought to you by the folks who created An Hour to Anywhere.
Hour to Anywhere? Isn't that a horror story Bradley Ramsey did?
Don't worry about it. Okay, so, anything we should know before we send you through? You got any, metal plates, pacemaker, and aversion to country music, perhaps?
Why would that last one matter?
Just, answer the question, please.
I mean, I don't hate it. It's not my jam, but...
Alright, that'll do. Go on in.
Oh, wow, I made it! Seems like I came through in one piece, but... Why do I have cooked spaghetti for fingers? And are these balloon animals where my toes should be? Oh, whoops! Looks like you got some of those pesky side effects. Don't worry, most people live very fulfilling lives despite these changes. You're saying they're permanent? How am I supposed to walk with balloon toes? Don't worry, you'll figure it out. Skip the plane and get to your destination faster than ever with minimal side effects. Try Minute Trips today. All right, and we're back. It feels really weird to be at this point in the episode already, but I'm taking solace in the fact that next week we'll be back to normal. So, as I said in the intro, this week a bunch of folks in the community submitted questions for me to answer in an interview on today's episode. I've asked the prompt goddess Sarah Rush to come back onto the show to interview me with those very questions. So buckle up, my friends, because it's about to get weird. Let's dive into this week's interview. All right, everybody. And this week on the Saved as Draft podcast, as you all well know, I am traveling for work and we're doing something a little different this time. So I'm going to introduce the person that will be interviewing me on this week's episode. So please welcome back to the show, the prompt goddess herself, Sarah Rush. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, Sarah, why don't you go ahead and hit me with the first question? And remember, everyone, these are questions submitted by the community. So I let people go crazy. Go ahead, Sarah.
Our first question is from Mina Howell, who asks, would you rather have cooked spaghetti for fingers or balloon animals for toes? You can decide whether or not to have sauce on the spaghetti fingers.
Yeah, I expected writing questions, but all of a sudden we get these crazy hypotheticals, which I don't know. I mean, I should have seen that coming too. All right, so this question. I saw somebody in the subscriber chat mention the hot dog fingers scene from Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was the first thing I thought of too. But with hypotheticals like these, I always think about what my kind of current lifestyle is like and how I could manage to continue being like, let's say, a writer, right? After this horrific shift in my physiology, right? So for that reason, I'm going to say balloon animals for toes. And my logic there is that cooked spaghetti would be very hard to type with because it's floppy, right? Regardless of whether or not you have sauce. The sauce would make things harder for sure, but even without sauce, you're still dealing with floppy wet noodles that aren't going to work very well on a keyboard. And let's be honest, voice to text is still not amazing. I cannot imagine a world where my fingers are made of spaghetti and therefore I have to dictate all of my writing. I feel like that would be its own circle of hell. So I'm going to say final answer, balloon animals for toes. And I realize that presents a popping issue as well. But don't worry, I've thought of that. See, because I'm a writer, and let's assume that I'm still working from home in this scenario, I would be able to relatively keep my toes safe from popping, that is, because I do spend a lot of time sitting at a desk, right? So, yeah, overall, I feel pretty good about the decision. I will say that having dogs and cats does present a existential threat to my toes in this scenario. I imagine they would get popped. So I don't know if they grow back or what happens there.
I can just immediately picture the cats just attacking your feet and just hearing a million popping sounds all at once.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like I'm like leaving my office to go use the bathroom. You just hear like a series of pops and me go, no.
I have like so many questions about this though. Like, could your balloon animal toes grow back as like different balloon animals, or do you just have saggy popped balloons as toes forever after they get popped? Like, there are a lot of possibilities here.
I know. Yeah, this is like we could spend the whole interview on this because I'm also thinking like, are the toes themselves the entire balloon animal, or am I gifted with balloon toes from specific animals? So, like, for example, like, do my toes look like, tiny little wiener dog balloon animals, or do I have a wiener dog's kind of paws where my toes should be in balloon form? Right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of ways you could go about this. All right, great first question from Mina. Let's move on. What's our second question, Sarah?
Our next question is from J.M. Gooding, who asks, what's the most overrated part of a taco and why are people lying about it?
Okay, yeah, let's dive into tacos. This reminds me of my friend James, who will consistently ask me if a taco is a sandwich as like a thought experiment, and he's been doing that for years. But so this reminded me of that. I think the most overrated part of a taco specifically is, and I feel like you're going to disagree with me on this one, but I feel like it's the hard shells. People seem to love hard shell tacos, and I just can't get behind them. I'm a soft shell kind of guy, and I'll tell you why. I'll let you jump in too because I want your thoughts on this. But I think hard shells are overrated. Now, if you do some sort of double layer situation where the hard shell's on the inside and the soft shell's on the outside, that I'm down with, especially if you put queso in the middle. But just having a hard shell taco on its own is just so overrated to me because 9 times out of 10 they will fall apart like a bite, maybe 2 bites in. Like people talk, people who are fans of hard shell tacos talk about it like it's the best thing. And yeah, sure, the crunch is nice. Don't get me wrong. It's a nice kind of like texture, but again, it falls apart after like 2 bites. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I really like hard shell tacos because I feel like a lot of times if you get soft shell ones, they just take out like a cold tortilla from a package and use that as the shell. And I feel like cold tortillas straight out of like a bag have this weird like odor that kind of smells like feet that I'm not a huge fan of. If you're getting like freshly made, like homemade tortillas, then like that's perfect. But just to like get like some mission ones and just be like, here you go, like, ugh. So I don't know. We can agree to disagree.
No,
I love
I mean
me
you
some
make some
crunchy
good,
tacos.
you make some good points. And now I feel like next time I go to have a soft shell taco from like right out of the packaging, I'm not going to be able to smell anything but feet. So that's fun. But no.
JM Kidding also had a follow up to this where the question was, is a taco still a taco if it's eaten over a sink at 2 a.m. or does it become a survival food?
That's such a JM question. Oh man. I just feel like that's something he would ask, knowing him. So okay, I think context is really important here. There is, I think, a certain shift that happens when you're eating something over a sink at 2 a.m. And it's the combination of things, right? Like eating something at 2 a.m. doesn't necessarily make it different than any other meal. It's just a late meal. But the second that you're like kind of scarfing it down over a sink, which I assume is because the sink is supposed to catch any food that falls, that definitely changes the entire kind of concept for me. I don't know if it necessarily makes it a survival food. I feel like if it's 2 a.m. and, this is the writer brain kicking in, but if it's 2 a.m. and there's like a war going on or aliens are invading or there's zombies outside, you're trying to squeeze in a quick taco over the sink for whatever reason. I don't know how you got a taco in this scenario, but that's obviously survival food, yes, because of the context, right? Like you are in danger, you are eating over the sink because it's fast and efficient, and that's that. Now, that being said, I'm thinking back to this one time years and years ago when I was hanging out with some people that I worked with at GameStop, and it was like 2 a.m. and we were eating over a sink, and I can't remember why. It was probably just, we were drinking and it was like late and we were having like some food or whatever. I don't know why we were eating over the sink, but I have this distinct memory of that. And for me at that point, it was not survival food. We were just having a good time, right? So and I guess his question also asked if it's still a taco. I think it's still a taco. I think the type of food that it is changes, but based on your context, it may not be survival food. I'm gonna make that my answer.
That's fair. Very fair. When I think survival food, I think like standing in front of your open fridge eating shredded cheese out of the bag. That's like a survival food. But a taco is still a taco because at least it's a food, like a whole completed food, not just like shoving raw ingredients into your face.
Yeah, exactly. Shoving raw ingredients in your face means that you didn't have time to make something. So therefore, it would be survival food. I agree with that. Yeah.
All right. Our next question is from Hallie Jules, who asks, would you rather be half horse all the time or turn into a horse during the day and back into a human at night?
So this is another one of those questions where I frame it within the context of my lifestyle and the fact that I'm a writer. So I go back and forth on this because on the one hand, being half horse would be pretty awesome just because centaurs are awesome, right? Like, but it would present a whole suite of challenges, all kinds of challenges, especially if it's all the time. So for that reason, I'm leaning towards turning into a horse during the day and back into a human at night because the nighttime could be used to write because I'm human and I have hands. And let's be honest, in today's day and age, like the world is just chaos and it's overstimulation and it's, it's a whole thing. So the idea of just turning into a horse and not caring about anything but what a horse cares about is really appealing, right? It's almost like you can just escape from the world and just enjoy, I don't know, whatever horses do, right? Like run around and such. I mean, I'm thinking about how where we live now, there's a horse farm behind the house. So it's like, okay, I could just jump the fence and go hang out with the other horses, right? Like that would work. The other option, of course, being that people would see a horse hanging out around our front yard and in the neighborhood, which I feel like that would draw questions quicker than anything. But yes, I think horse during the day, back into human at night. That's my answer, so that I can still maintain my writing lifestyle. Literally moonlighting as a writer.
Yeah, but if you were a half horse all the time, then you could have the song "Half Horse, Half Man" as your like literal theme song for eternity. And I don't know why you would give up that opportunity.
I mean, that's a very compelling argument. I'll give you that. Like I said, that between that and centaurs, I definitely, I definitely see that side of things. I'm going to stick with my answer, but your point stands.
All right. Our next question is from J. Allen Winchester, who asks, "What collaborative ideas would you like to play around with in 2026?"
Great question from Jaden here. And it was so funny because Jaden, I know in the chat, said something about how he was being boring by asking a writing question, but I wanted some writing questions. So shout out to Jaden for being the one to submit one. As far as collaborative ideas go, yeah, I mean, I've been getting more involved with collaborative projects on Substack, kind of jumping into different things here and there, other podcasts, other writing stuff. But personally, what I would like to do in 2026 is I want to do two things. I want to do more of the Devine challenges that I've done here and there, possibly something during Flash Fiction February like we did last year. But essentially, for those who aren't aware, I've done a few kind of one-off sort of Devine prompts over the last, year plus that I've been on Substack. And for those prompts, I invite people to write stories set in Devine. And I give them a lot of leeway in terms of, kind of using the lore and stuff like that, with the caveat that certain stories aren't going to be considered canon for obvious reasons. But those have always been so successful, like in terms of the number of stories, the way people get into it, the way that people kind of dive deeper into the lore and get to know the world so that they can write their story. Like all of these things make those challenges such a success. And I know a lot of people enjoy writing in Devine. So I want to do that more in 2026. I want to open up that world a bit. Again, while trying to maintain some semblance of continuity and stuff, but it is such a large kind of space, both physically and metaphorically, that you can do a lot of stories set in different time periods and locations that don't really run into each other or cause issues with one another. So definitely want to do more of that. The other big collaborative thing that I want to do in 2026 is I want to try something similar with the Synaptic Sprawl mythos, which is, of course, my horror kind of universe. Well, multiverse, really. And so between that and Devine, those are kind of my main connected universes. And so on the horror side of things in the Synaptic Sprawl, I've never done anything collaborative there, other than the Clenchport animated series, obviously, which involves a lot of people. That, of course, is set in that universe. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But I've never really done like hey, here's a prompt. It's set in the Sprawl. Here's the rules. Here's how wardens work. Here's what the exiled ones are. And, basic stuff like that. And then have people write horror stories in there. And because we have several prominent horror authors in the community, like, shout out to L.G. Wells, Connor Mancuso, of course, Mina Howell's a horror author, and plenty of others, obviously. I would like to see what they do with it. So yeah, I think in 2026, I want to explore doing more collaborations just in general, but on my side of things, more Devine, and let's see what happens when people get access to the Synaptic Sprawl multiverse. I would like to see what they do with that.
Nice. I'm looking forward to seeing all those things happen this year. All right. Our next question is from Rebecca Watson, who asks, if you're writing life for a secret society, what would the initiation ritual look like, and what would the forbidden book be?
This is a good question, and it's tough because I kind of have a good answer for the first half, but the second half I'm going to have to kind of come up with it in real time. So let me start with the first half then. So if my writing life were a secret society, and the initiation ritual. So something that I have done in my stories before, and I also dabbled with back when I was a ghostwriter, was this idea of worlds where writers have the capacity to bring their ideas to life, right? Like those themes have shown up in my stories. And then, of course, we had a power-up prompt several weeks ago with a similar concept where the writers in that world were basically gods, right? So, and shout out to also Clair Obscur Expedition 33, the recent game that came out, that also did something similar that I won't spoil, but had writers in it as kind of a as a supernatural element at one point, part of the larger universe there. But yeah, so the idea that writers have like actual powers, right? So if my writing life were a secret society, and it would be a secret society built around people who possess the ability to bring their writing to life, whether it's through dark arts or the occult or whatever, right? But the secret society would be composed of people who can manipulate reality with their writing. They'd be like a special super version of writers, right? And so the initiation ritual would essentially be testing them to see if they fit into that category. And of course, because I am who I am, there would probably be some silly elements of the initiation ritual too that I don't have off the top of my head here, but I could imagine some of it just being there for just for laughs, right? Like like it wouldn't be all serious. But the ultimate goal would be, of course, to test whether or not they possess that latent power. And again, I'm world building here while answering the question, but because that theme has shown up so many times in my stories, I feel like it would absolutely be a part of this secret society. As far as what the forbidden book would be, the first thing that came to mind was the Necronomicon, but that's just because I love H.P. Lovecraft. And I feel like at that point, the Necronomicon would probably be required reading, not forbidden reading. So I'm trying to figure out a good answer. All right, the forbidden book would be anything related. Okay, it wouldn't necessarily be one forbidden book, but I guess in order to answer the question here, I would say that it would be any of the math textbooks that I had to deal with in high school and college, because one of the reasons that I became a writer and decided very early on, second grade, that I wanted to be a writer is because I am very, very bad at math and numbers and all that fun stuff. So I don't want any of that near my secret society. So the forbidden book would be a math textbook, specifically one that I had to deal with. I obviously don't know any off the top of my head, but yeah, no math is allowed in our secret society.
Well, I'm signing up to join right now. That sounds amazing. So, all right. Our next question is from Jennifer Jorgensen, who asks, "What scares you about your writing?"
Simple question, but it gets my mind going. I think the thing that scares me about my writing sometimes is that it's a couple of things. Number one is sometimes I don't know where the ideas come from, and that's both exciting and scary in equal measure, because we all know what inspiration feels like, but if you really stop and like you look back on some of your stories, maybe ones that were different than what you normally do, and we think about the process of writing it, kind of getting into that flow state. I mean, as someone like me who's like a plantser where I kind of pants my way through it, but I have with other projects an outline as well. And I do a combination of those things. When you're kind of quote unquote pantsing your way through a story, there's those moments where you get this idea and you love it and you run with it and it feels great, but where did that come from, right? Like, and then you start to get into like some philosophical kind of existential type stuff. Like, there's ideas like stories, poetry, stuff like that, where I look at it and I go, oh yeah, that was inspired by this, or this was inspired by that. And I know where that came from. But then there's also things where it's like, sure, I'm proud of it, but I don't know where the heck it came from. And then, being a writer, I start to imagine, okay, so let's lay it out. Let's lay out the possibilities. Was it literally just inspiration? Or was it an idea that was planted in my mind by something else, right? Or was it sent to me for a specific reason? Like all these different possibilities start to open up, and then that can become pretty scary and from an existential standpoint, where it's like, well, okay, if writers possess the ability to be like remotely sort of, not necessarily manipulated, but influenced by other maybe beings that exist in dimensions beyond our own, or let's say past or present, or past or future versions of ourselves. If you're thinking about time travel, there's so many possibilities. And then it's like, oh, and then at that point, it's like, wait a second, I don't even know my own mind that well, if that's the case. Like, where are these signals coming from, right? And that, I think, is a little scary. So that's one answer that I've, from time to time, I'll be like, ugh, it kind of creeps me out when I think about it. The other idea, of course, the flip side of that is that if you are somehow getting ideas from somewhere else, if you are like a human radar dish, what happens if the signal stops? Like, that's scary. Will I just suddenly not be able to write one day because whatever's been feeding me these ideas no longer has any use for me? That's terrifying, you know? But putting all that aside for a second, the other thing that I would say about what scares me about my writing is there have been a couple of times, only a couple, where I have written a story that scared me to the extent that I was on edge for hours afterward, right? So the first time it happened was many, many years ago. I remember I was writing alone in my apartment, and I'd gotten to this one scene, and it was for a book I was working on at the time. This is back when I was a freelance writer, so I can't probably give too many details because it was most likely a ghost writing project. But I remember I wrote something that was kind of like almost like a fourth wall breaking kind of moment, and it was for a horror story. And for a moment, I felt like the presence from the story was in the room with me. Like I had opened a doorway by breaking that fourth wall. And I got this feeling that something was standing behind me. And I remember like just spinning around in my chair, and obviously there was nothing there, but like I couldn't shake that feeling all night. And something similar happened last year when I was working on Crush Depth Part 2, which was my story about a breach in the ocean floor and a team that takes a submersible down there to investigate. Crush Depth Part 2 has a fourth wall breaking twist at the end where the narrator is addressing the reader directly, and I won't spoil it entirely in case somebody wants to check it out. But that direct dialogue between the narrator and the reader, it freaked me out. Like, again, I had that feeling like something was watching me over my shoulder the rest of the night. And so, yeah, kind of a long-winded answer with multiple parts there, but that's what I would say is what scares me when it comes to writing.
Definitely an interesting answer. Thank you for that. Our next question is from Teresa Green, who asks, "What was the first book you read by yourself?"
Great question. My first thought was, of course, like the Goosebumps books. Like, I know I read a lot of those by myself, but I think I can go back even earlier than that. I can't say for sure if it was the first book I ever read by myself, but I remember checking it out from the library at my elementary school. So I was definitely super young, first, second, third grade, most likely one of those. And it was an alphabet book, but as everyone's probably guessed, it wasn't a normal alphabet book. It was I just Googled it real quick, but it was a book called Animalia by Graeme Base. And I highly recommend it, regardless of the age of the person reading, because it's an alphabet book that has really surreal, beautiful art throughout the entire book. And each of the pages uses alliteration, which is probably why I'm such a big fan of alliteration now, I think, is going back to this book. But reading this in elementary school, the pictures were obviously incredible. And then each page was dedicated to a letter of the alphabet, and it would spell out kind of what was happening on the page in the image using alliteration. So, for example, there's just a quick like Google search example here where they say that A is for armored armadillos avoiding an angry alligator, right? So just really nice alliteration. And of course, the image would then show you that. It would show you armadillos in armor running from angry alligators. And then past that, everything in the image would start with the letter A. So you wouldn't see anything in the image that wasn't something that started with the letter A, whether it be an object, an animal, or whatever, right? And that theme applied throughout the entire book. And so yes, it's just an alphabet book, but it really influenced me as a writer because number one, like I said, it's definitely where my love of alliteration came from. But two, the vocabulary of these different pages, these are big words that they use, in each of the alphabet letters. I think just kind of going through that book over and over again gave me like a jump start when it comes to my vocabulary as a writer, I think. And to this day, I have a copy of it downstairs. I still like to flip through it and just, it's almost like a tongue twister trying to read some of these pages with all the alliterations. But I remember very distinctly reading that book, of course, by myself over and over, trying to learn what all the words mean, trying to find all the fun things hidden in each of the pictures. For example, there's a kid character who I believe is based on the author, and he appears in every single image throughout the book. And so it kind of adds like this almost like Where's Waldo minigame that you can play as you're reading it as well. Seriously, one of the coolest books ever. I will never, ever, ever forget it. And yeah, like I said, I have a lot of memories of reading it by myself and just studying it from top to bottom in every way possible. Fantastic book.
Good. I remember you showing me that book. It was very cool, very surreal. I like it.
Hmm.
All right. Our next questions are from Namita Call, who submitted three of them. So the first one is, which is the genre that you haven't tried yet and never will as of now?
Great question. So I primarily focus on sci-fi, horror, and fantasy. That's kind of where my wheelhouse is. As I've mentioned in passing on Substack before, I've also written romance novels back when I was a ghostwriter. So while it's not my primary genre, I do like, as we've seen on Substack, I do like doing, poetry and kind of more bittersweet kind of stories and stuff that have a romance angle. So while it's not one of my main genres, it's something I have written and continue to write, at least to an extent. I think the only genre that I haven't tried and never will is probably going to be historical fiction. And when I say that, I mean stories that are set like in specific historical time periods, or something else that I probably won't dabble in but do enjoy is, of course, alternate history, where specific things went differently and it led to kind of an alternate version of the past as a result of that shift. I do love stories like that, don't get me wrong. But for me, it's a couple of things. Number one, writing historical fiction requires a lot of research. And as someone who, I do research all the time for my work, but I don't know that my research skills and my writing skills can properly portray a specific time period of the past in a way that I would be satisfied with. I think what would end up happening is I would get so obsessed with getting all the details right, the clothing, the atmosphere, the dialogue, the way people interacted and spoke with each other, like all these things. The sheer level of things that I would have to kind of become an expert on in order to write it in a way that I felt like was accurate. It would I can guarantee you it would consume me in the sense that I would just spend all my time researching, and I would never actually start the story because I'd be so obsessed with getting all the details right. So for that reason, I don't think I'll ever do historical fiction or alternate history fiction. Again, do enjoy them, respect the heck out of writers that do it and get all those details right. But for me, I would, just as a writer, I enjoy creating those things from scratch as much as possible, or setting it in a more modern setting where I have lived it and therefore can speak to it, right? So again, total respect, love stories like that, especially ones that really get all the details right. It's just the amount of legwork I think would end up kind of pulling me down a rabbit hole that I wouldn't be able to get out of. So for that reason, I just leave it to the experts.
Very, very fair. Another question from Namita Call, who now wanted to ask, which genre would you want to try next?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think. Obviously with the power up prompts, we do a lot of different genres and have done a lot of different genres. But due to my busy schedule, I don't always get to participate myself. I get to live vicariously through all the entries that I talk about on the podcast. So I think I'm almost positive I've never really done a steampunk story. And again, like when I think steampunk, it leans a bit towards historical fiction, just in the sense that the technology of steampunk is obviously inspired by like the Industrial Revolution. So I know that there would be some level of research needed there to kind of, at least get the technology and the setting right for the genre. But there were some really cool steampunk stories for that power up prompt a few weeks back, or months at this point. I'm not really sure. But I loved him. I loved the setting. I love the atmosphere. I love the visuals of steampunk. Everything about it I love. It's just one of those things where, again, the imposter syndrome creeps in. Like, can I really get those details right as someone who's never written it? And I think it's one of those genres that I definitely want to try at some point.
All right. Which horror book or work do you wish that you had written?
So this is an interesting question. I'm wondering if Namita's asking... I guess I can answer it two ways here. I'm wondering if Namita's asking, out of all of the horror books / works that exist, today in our world, which one do I wish I had written? That's one way I interpret it. The other way, of course, is what horror book or work, idea do I have that I wish I had written? So I can kind of answer it both ways. I want to say the first way is probably what Namita meant. So, yeah, which horror book / work do I wish I had written? My mind goes back to the first Stephen King book that I read, which was, of course, Pet Sematary. And I think that was one of the key moments where I kind of really wanted to be a horror writer. I was probably too young at the time to be reading that book. I don't remember how old I was, but I mean, it scared the crap out of me. But the concept was endlessly fascinating. I was so obsessed with the idea of it. I thought it was the coolest idea in the world. And I remember I would read that book for hours just on the couch at my parents' house. I had like a couch in the living room where I would put my feet up, lay kind of across it, and I would have a stack of books next to me, and I would just spend whole days sitting there cycling through books. This is going to sound weird, and it's a bit of a tangent, but I would read all the books simultaneously in the sense that I would like read one for a few chapters and then be like, all right, I'm going to switch. And it was almost like a buffet of books. And I know, Sarah, I do this with games too, and it's like, it's confusing to some people because it's like, why not just focus on one until it's done? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I was weird like that. I would have like stacks of I would have a literal TBR stack and I would work through them, sampling a little bit of each one. But yeah, so Pet Sematary. I think I wish I had been the one that come up with that idea because number one, it's super successful, but number two, it was just such a unique concept. And if I'm going to be honest here, and I think some people listening will agree, Stephen King is not the best with his endings. Like I every time I read some of his stuff, Pet Sematary and then his other book Cell come to mind. Phenomenal concepts, great execution, but the endings just don't do it for me. They're usually some sort of kind of cliffhanger that introduces yet another interesting idea right at the end, only for it to never get resolved, right? And I'm not saying he's never done a sequel, but he doesn't do many sequels. Obviously, like Dark Tower, for example, was a whole series. So, but to my knowledge, off the top of my head, neither of those books ever got a sequel. Point being that those endings just were left unresolved. And so, if I had written that, I would have done a more, kind of comprehensive ending, or at the very least, explored what the end of the book was doing there with Pet Sematary, which is, of course, spoiler alert. I know it's an old book, but the ending there basically implied that people could be brought back to life in the same way that animals were brought back to life. And now that I think about it, that's actually introduced earlier in the book as part of the main story. But the point is, an adult woman in the story is brought back to life and shows up at the end. And I just wish we could have explored that a little bit further, because prior to that, the only person that had been brought back to life was like an adolescent. So what happens when it's like a fully grown adult who's like lived, more of their life and has more lived experiences? Does that change anything? I don't know, because the book ended. Same thing with Cell. That one had a really phenomenal premise, but just, as soon as it got interesting, it ended. So I wish I'd done Pet Sematary, or honestly, I would have taken Cell as well, because I love the premise of that one too. Yeah, as far as if there's a book / work that I wish I had written that I never wrote, for me, it's not necessarily horror. It's more like horror. I mean, it does have horror elements, but it also mixes in sort of like, I guess you could say fantasy. It's like horror and fantasy. But Sarah, you'll recognize this one. But this is a book of mine, or a story of mine that I wrote back in high school. And back then, it was just called Life Is But a Dream. And at the time, that draft was over 500 pages total, and that, of course, was spread across 3 quote-unquote books, or it was like parts or something. Point is, I still remember the idea, and that idea is something that I have always wanted to go back to and actually write, but over the many, many years since I wrote that idea back in high school, I don't have access to that draft anymore. So really, it's just the premise is still in my head. It's become this thing where it's like, I'll write it when I think I'm good enough to write it because I remember it so fondly. And even now, after all the progress I've made, it's probably imposter syndrome's talking, but even after all the progress I've made as a writer, I still look back on that idea and I go, nope, you're not good enough yet. Keep waiting. You know what I mean? And I want to get over that and write the thing. I don't want to end up like George R.R. Martin, where I never actually finish something like that. Something so impactful to me and something that I think would do really well, even in today's day and age. So yeah, that's kind of a part 2 answer to that question, but I think I probably answered the initial intention of the question with my first answer there.
Good answers. Good answers. All right. Our next 2 questions are from Mariah K. Porter. The first one is, where does the sustainability in your drive come from?
Oh, that's a good question from Mariah. There is no single source, that I can point to. There's no like secret weapon that's like, oh yeah, this is the thing that always keeps me going, keeps me like, gives me energy and all that stuff. It's always, and I think this is one of those things where it's one of those, in life, nothing is ever that simple, right? So in this case, I'm human like anybody else, right? Like I run into burnout. I have periods where imposter syndrome is hitting me. I have days where I, switch over from work to Substack stuff and I'm like, man, does anybody really care what I'm doing? Is any of this really getting through to anyone? What's the point? So on and so forth. So, I mean, even though I present on the podcast and on Substack and on the community, I always present as like somebody who always has it together. I really don't, right? And the internet allows us to kind of portray ourselves however we want, and sometimes I use that, but at the same time, I've also, definitely been vulnerable on Substack, and that's of course thanks to the community for being so supportive and welcoming. I feel safe to kind of say, when I'm struggling, right? So that's one of the things. Having a community surrounding me that is like so supportive and just genuinely believes in what I'm doing, and obviously brings their own creativity and artistic talent to the table. Being inside of a community like that is a huge source of energy and inspiration and drive for me. It gives me a lot of purpose. And seeing it grow and continuing to find ways to invite more people to make it better, to make it, the best place it can be for writers and all manner of creatives. That's something I've wanted my whole life. And having discovered it on Substack, it very early on, when I saw the seeds of it there, that became a primary source of drive and purpose for me, because I really, truly believe in this community and everybody within it. So that's a huge one. The other part, of course, is that I am, I'm a writer through and through. It's down to my very soul. I'm a writer, right? So even when I, maybe physically burned out or mentally burned out, I still love writing and the act of writing. And when I get into something, or when it's flowing well, or I'm working on the podcast or whatever, that excitement is like an infinite source of energy, at least in the moment, right? You can get all kinds of bursts of excitement and energy. And I know people listening will resonate with this, because that's part of the reason why being a creative is so fun, because you get that energy that just practically comes out of thin air, but it's that excitement around what you're doing. And then, of course, number 3, I have to obviously give the nod to you, Sarah, because as many people know, as I've said before countless times, Sarah here is just the most supportive and just amazing partner that anyone could ask for. She believes in what I'm doing. She believes in the work that we're doing here. She believes in my crazy ideas, in my weird podcast, all of it. And she does so without, just unconditionally. And that, I cannot overstate how important that is. And I know all of you listening, I've heard some amazing stories about some of your partners and people in your life who are supportive for you. And as someone who has experienced a lack of support and now the support that I need, it really does make the difference. It's night and day. And yeah, so my advice, I guess, to kind of cap off this question is, think about who you have in your life that supports you like that. And if you don't have someone like that, why not? And if someone's not supporting you, why are you still talking to them? You know what I mean? Because a lot of us, this is who we are, take it or leave it. And if someone's not going to support you unconditionally, now that I know what that feels like, courtesy of our prompt goddess here, I will never go back. I will never accept anything less than the support that I know that I deserve, and the kind that Sarah gives me. So, something to think about, even though this interview's about me. All right, Sarah, we can go to the next question.
Well, as I guess kind of ends up being an add-on to that previous question, but what part of your involvement in Substack brings you the most joy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think I kind of tiptoed into that a little bit here. Oh, it's hard to pick just one part. I mean, obviously it's the community, right? Like, but I can be more specific than that. I think that's kind of like an obvious answer. It's the community. But beyond that, it's the moments when I see the community coming together to support the human beings behind the art. And that applies to me and others as well. So over the course of the last year plus that I've been on Substack, there have been countless examples where people have been struggling financially, mentally, emotionally, all kinds of stuff. And the amount of vulnerability in this community cannot be understated. It is a beautiful thing to see, because when you're on the internet and you're vulnerable, you are gambling, because more often than not, people will take advantage of that and you'll get hit with trolls and just nasty people. And so, but that obviously can and does happen on Substack, but it's rare. More often than not, when people are vulnerable like that, they get met with unconditional support, with people asking how they can help, sending obviously their thoughts, and letting them know that they're not alone in whatever they're struggling with. And then of course, when it comes to financial type stuff, people are donating, people are buying books. It's just a beautiful thing. And Substack, has its own fair share of problems, but our community feels like the closest thing that I have ever seen in my time on Earth to a true utopia, in the sense that everybody here just genuinely cares about each other, supports each other, and we're not competing with each other either. We're all lifting each other up, and that is just incredibly rare. And it's my favorite thing about being in this community, and it does bring me the most joy. Like I said, people have helped me get through a lot of stuff. I look back on that fondly, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But like I said, I've seen it for others too, and I always try to encourage it when I see it. So I think that's my answer.
Our next question is from the Verdant Butterfly, who asks, we've heard you mention a project you're working on with other creatives called Clunchport, and you've hinted that there's a second podcast taking shape around that world. Can you tell us more about what Clunchport is, introduce us to some of the characters we might meet there, and very importantly, who James is?
Yeah, great question. So Clunchport is the name of a fictional town in Southwest Virginia, and it is the setting of an upcoming animated horror comedy series that it's been a project of mine that, of course, I've been working on. James, who I'll talk about, has been working on. There are 10 plus people on the team. Sarah, of course, you are involved with it. And we are obviously recruiting more and more people as time goes on. Specifically, we're looking for animators, artists, voice actors. But I, as a very obviously busy writer, I'm also looking for other writers in the community who I think might be a good fit to help write aspects of it as well. But beyond being a fictional town and a animated series, my vision for Clunchport is, as I mentioned earlier, it is a town that exists within my larger Synaptic Sprawl multiverse. And so what I want to do with this setting is I want to create my first ever transmedia universe that exists across animation, podcasts, short stories, potentially books. I would love comics to be a thing at some point. The point is, I want it to exist across a bunch of mediums, and I want it to tie into the larger mythos of mine while also standing on its own. And the other part of it, too, is that I want people to enjoy all of these different kind of Clunchport stories, either together or on their own. So if you're like, yeah, I'm not really interested in the series, but that podcast sounds cool, you can check that out and still get a full, complete story with its own unique elements. Same thing goes for the short stories or a potential book, right? Like, it should stand on its own, but it should connect more deeply into the wider universe. And that, of course, obviously, the main kind of foundational aspect of it is that animated series, which will be called The Chronicles of Clunchport. And yeah, so this all came from, it's kind of an evolution or a culmination and evolution, really, of all of my ideas when it comes to the world of animation. So to explain, I'll rewind the clock all the way back to when I was 15. I was volunteering for community service hours at the Orlando Science Center down in Florida. And I met another person my age named James Nethery. And as it turned out, James Nethery is an animator. Obviously, he was 15 like me. He wasn't a professional animator yet, but his dad was, in fact, an animator for Disney and worked on several different films that you would recognize. And so James was already pretty good at animation at this point. And when we got to talking, I said, well, I'm a writer. And of course, I was writing all kinds of stories. So it was really a match made in heaven, because we basically said, well, we should be working together, like on projects. And we did right off the bat. We would usually obviously have like a lunch break. We would work at the science center there, getting those community hours, and we would have kind of a break to go get lunch, obviously. And we worked there on weekends because we were still in school, of course. And so during our lunch breaks, we would eat as fast as possible, and then we'd go rush off and find a quiet area, and we would record lines that I had written from a script that I had written at home the prior week. And he would bring his parents' camcorder and we would just flip that on and use the microphone on it to record lines. And then, of course, he would take the scripts that I wrote with him that I printed out and he would start animating it. And then when we would meet up other weeks, we would, check out the in-progress animation. At one point, I helped animate on a project. It was not good. But in any case, we have been friends now for over 20 years. And over the course of that time, we invented several characters who came and went and others who stayed. So one of the ones who stayed was a character. His real name is Randall Peterson, but he goes by his online handle, Trollslayer. And he started out as kind of this fun character that lived in his mom's basement and would rant on the internet about things that he didn't like. And we used that concept to do a number of small animated shorts at the time. And I, of course, played Trollslayer, and I would just do improv of these different topics. And so years later, amongst other projects and stuff, we started saying, okay, well, what happens when we zoom out beyond this Trollslayer character and his mom and their house? Like, where do they live? What's going on in that town? And at the time we had other characters, and then so we started building this connected universe of this like fictional town where these characters could potentially interact and be part of a larger world. And we liked that a lot. That was really cool. And so that eventually led to Clenchport, obviously. The premise of the series, of course, is that Trollslayer and his mom moved to the town, but the idea is still the same. We have these characters who all exist in the same fictional town, and some of them know more about the town's secrets than others. As I mentioned, it is an animated horror comedy series, and being that it's set in my horror mythos, it is specifically Lovecraftian / cosmic horror. So there is like darker elements to the town and mysteries surrounding the town that the characters will either uncover or try to hide based on who you're talking about as the series goes on. So yeah, and Trollslayer is going to be one of the main characters. Another character that will be a major player in the series is a immortal being, immortal and invincible. You can't kill him, and he's lived for hundreds, if not thousands of years. He's the result of an experiment, and so he's escaped and he's on the run. And so he's currently in Clenchport, hiding out. Basically, he has a convenience store that again is a front for a real store that he runs underground, which caters to all kinds of creatures and monsters from across the multiverse. He's got to make his money after all, but he is on the run. And so his story will be important alongside Trollslayer, who will eventually find himself embroiled in this whole cosmic horror side of the town. And there's obviously more than characters than that, but that's just a couple examples. And yeah, like I've talked about who James is. As far as the podcast goes, I'll touch upon that briefly. So as I said, I wanted the podcast to be an example of something that is related to Clenchport but stands on its own. So the premise of the podcast, which will be titled The Many Worlds of Clenchport, is a show, a narrative podcast starring two Clenchport residents who've lived there their entire lives. And they have now, over the course of their lives, they've always been interested in Clenchport's urban legends and weird stories and its kind of strange history. So part of them is starting a podcast to just chat about that, talk about the theories behind some of the weirder things that have happened in Clenchport. But as part of that podcast, very early on in the series, they will uncover an underground archive of audio which contains recordings from other parallel versions of Clenchport, thereby confirming that they do exist in a multiverse, which is, of course, the wider structure of my mythos. And so the way the podcast will work is that they're going to spend time talking about stories they know from their version of Clenchport and the world that they live in. But then they're also going to use this archive they've discovered to sort through some of that found audio and see how similar events played out in alternate parallel universes. And I know that sounds wild, but I ease into it in the series over the course of the first few episodes. And then as it goes on, it will sort of retain that structure. It'll be one episode talks about a story or urban legend in the world that they live in. And then the next episode will be a quote unquote side B where they explore the alternate universes. So it has some structure as it goes on. But yeah, The Many Worlds of Clenchport. That's an upcoming podcast. The plan is to release them monthly. I wanted to get it out in January here, but due to circumstances, it will most likely be out sometime in February. I'm thinking mid-February might be the safest bet. But I will, of course, keep everyone updated on the progress there. Once it's out, though, the plan is to do monthly episodes. And that will, of course, allow you to get more knowledge and information and lore about Clenchport as a town and its history, which again is not required for the series, but will absolutely benefit your viewing experience.
Good. I'm very excited about Clenchport. I'm really like looking forward to seeing how I guess it does with the community, because I obviously have gotten to read and slash hear a few of the episodes of the podcast, and it is so funny and so smart and just perfect. So I'm very excited to see more from Clenchport.
No, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. And also for anybody who has read my article about the Chronicles of Clenchport, that show key art was done by Sarah, and Sarah will also be designing our logo for the podcast. So stay tuned for that.
All right. And these last three questions are from me. So the first one is, when are you going to finish your cosmic horror novel?
So this is an ongoing joke between Sarah and I, where she constantly asks me when I'm going to finish my book. So I am trying to publish some stuff in 2026. And for those who know me, you know that I was a ghostwriter for many years, and the last several years have been me trying to establish a presence for my work. But in general, in 2026, I want to actually put out some actual books. I'm thinking poetry collections, obviously, because those wouldn't be too hard to put together, given that I've written a lot of poetry. But the other big one, of course, is that cosmic horror novel. This thing has been, much like the Life is But a Dream story I mentioned earlier, it has become an albatross in my mind, and I'm doing my best. Sarah has actually volunteered to help me work on it from an outline perspective, which I am absolutely going to take her up on. Because what it is, it's a cosmic horror novel that started as a short story back in 2016, and I wrote it. When I first started writing it, it was a satirical horror short story inspired by the political events of that year. And then it became this whole kind of, broader idea. And I was like, okay, well, this short story that I'm writing feels like the middle of the story if we're going to really do this. So I said, okay, let's go back, let that story kind of sit there as sort of like a book 2 premise, but we need to go back and write book 1. And so I started working on what I initially considered to be a short prequel that kind of sets up the events of that second book, or that major story. And as these things do, they evolved and changed as they went on. And now what I've got is basically the first book of a cosmic horror trilogy. And at its current point, it has 30,000 words roughly in the current draft. But the reason why the book has been struggling is because I have 6 POVs that I switch between, and I have really struggled with how to balance them, how to keep it organized, while also, constantly asking myself, do we need this many POVs? And I think the answer is yes, because the first book is about the downfall of civilization after a major kind of, thing happens, an inciting event, if you will. It's about the downfall of civilization, essentially, setting up for a post-apocalyptic book 2. And so the goal with the 6 POVs in book 1 is to present a number of different perspectives, because I think that is super important to show just how quickly and how chaotically the world fell apart, right? And so figuring out that balance, getting that organization right, that has become a nigh impossible task in my mind, and it has paralyzed me from continuing to work on the book. But like I said, Sarah has graciously offered to help me look at the outline, and I've actually had some beta readers look at the first couple chapters, and I got some really good feedback from them as well. So 2026, I'm going to finish this thing. I do plan to do some self-publishing, but with this project specifically, my goal as of now remains to try and get into the quote-unquote query trenches and start sending it to agents, see if I can actually get this thing traditionally published. But that being said, over the course of my time on Substack and over recent years, I have gained a deep, deep, deep appreciation for self-published authors and for all the work that they do, and how much progress that self-publishing has made in general compared to traditional publishing. It's really inspiring to see. So I would not feel bad at all if I ended up, self-publishing this book instead. But this is a big idea of mine. It's the closest I've ever gotten a big idea of mine to actually being finished. And it makes me think back to all the way in second grade when I was reading, all Goosebumps and stuff like that. And probably shortly thereafter, Stephen King, even though I was a little young, thinking about how I wanted to be a published author like them. It kind of goes back to that. And so for that reason, I'm going to try and pursue that. But that's this year. At the very least, the manuscript will be done, and ideally I'll be shopping it around by the end of the year to agents once it's been polished and edited.
I will be holding you to that.
Thank you.
All right. My next question is, out of all the sponsors on the podcast, which one do you wish was real?
So this is a really tough question because I think about, if all things aside, if money was no object, if technology and like the logistics of it were, off the playing field, one of my favorites, obviously, as you know, Sarah, was the Haiku Highway Buddy. Not very practical, but very, very funny, and we still talk about it from time to time. I would just love to see that thing in real life. Just a GPS that reads you directions in haiku, if for anybody who's not aware, was the concept there. Now, more practically speaking, my other big favorite that I think back to is StorySense, which is, of course, the sponsor. I believe, Sarah, you helped me come up with that idea. More often than not, everyone, Sarah's the one behind these ideas. I'll brainstorm some stuff for that week's podcast sponsor, and she'll be the one to kind of give me, like the aha moment. Which is, of course, why she's also known as the prompt goddess, because back when I got my start last year in Flash Fiction February, a lot of the most successful prompts came from her. So yeah, StorySense, the concept there, of course, being candles that are themed around the story you're reading. So just adding another layer of immersion to the experience. Obviously, Sarah and I love scented candles. More often than not, we're lighting incense or candles around the house. So I like the concept of a pairing like that. And then, of course, fans of my work will know that I always do musical pairings. So I just like multi-sensory sort of experiences, right? And so StorySense, to me, feels realistic. I know others, if you go on Etsy, you can find candles that are inspired with scents from certain worlds and stories. So I kind of want to do that, but focused in on our community and what we got going on and some of the worlds that I have and just the idea of like sitting down to read a book or listen to an audiobook set in one of my worlds, and you can light up a candle and have like ideally a nice scent. But let's be honest, with horror, it could be anything. But basically something to kind of add another layer of dimension to that. So that's my other answer. It's kind of a two-part answer there.
Good. I wish that spooky security was real, because having ghosts like be my home security system sounds amazing.
I still love spooky security. That was a great Halloween one.
All right. And the final question, since you always ask this question of your guests, what's one piece of writing advice you would give to someone just starting out on their creative journey?
Oh, yeah. Oh, turn it back around on me. This is, as you said, this is the question it's the last question that I ask every guest on the show. And I have gotten some really good answers over the 40 plus interviews that I've done. I've gotten some really good answers. I think for me, it's my advice would be to, once you have something that you're excited about, that you feel good about, just post it. Like, obviously do your due diligence when it comes to editing, grammar, all that good stuff. But a lot of people get stuck with that first post or with that first story or that first poem. They get stuck thinking, well, it's not good enough, or, well, like nobody's going to care, or nobody's going to read it. They just like talk themselves into like an imposter syndrome loop. As a result of that, I know that there are writers out there who could do great work, but for whatever reason, they never took that leap. They just convinced themselves that their voice didn't matter and that their story didn't matter. And now we'll never know. Yeah, it's entirely possible that you put it out and it just goes into the void. We've all been there. I've been there. I was there for years. I always say that. Well, over on Vocal, like, I would celebrate when 5 people read a story of mine. And yes, that's its own topic, and that can be really crushing, and that is fair. But there's always the chance that you put it out and it just completely resonates with people. Or honestly, even if it just resonates with one person, I think a lot of us would agree that that is extremely special, right? And so my advice is to don't let yourself get caught up in the what ifs. Don't convince yourself that your stories don't matter and that your voice doesn't matter. Don't give imposter syndrome time to get its hooks in you. I think that is how I would say it. Don't give imposter syndrome a chance to get its hooks into you. Just post it, put it out, publish it. As soon as it's in a form that, I know a lot of writers are going to say, well, it'll never be ready. It's never perfect. Yes, I know. Trust me, I know. But when it gets to the point where all other, internal voices aside, when it's ready, put it out. Especially because with Substack, you can edit it, right? Like I made a joke the other day about I had a meme about how I always find typos after I post something. Well, you can edit it. Edit the post afterward. Like, it's fine. Just put it out. Publish it. I know it's scary. I know it's tough taking that leap, but you won't know until you try. And yes, your first post may not be a wild viral success, but I guarantee you it's going to resonate with somebody. And that little bit of hope, that like, that comment, that restack, that's going to get you excited about the next piece, and then the next piece. And next thing you know, you're a part of this community. You're building your own, brand and audience, and you're meeting new writers, and you're connecting with people. And all of these things would not have happened if you didn't take that leap. So that's my advice. Just as Shia LaBeouf would say, just do it.
That is very good advice. So thank you for that. As someone who also struggles with like putting myself out there, that is very helpful, because it's very easy to think, well, my post didn't do so great, so why bother, trying again? Because obviously nobody cares. But that's not true. I know that's not true, but it's hard to get out of that spiral in your head. So
it really is. So if you can mitigate the spiral by just, shutting off your thoughts for a second and hitting the publish button, you're doing yourself and the world a favor by putting your work out there. So
well, thank you for all this great advice.
Yeah, no, thank you. Huge shout out to you, Sarah. Thank you so much for interviewing me. I know this was an unorthodox, segment this week. Usually I'm the one interviewing people. But given the sudden business travel that I have to go on, this seemed like a great way to keep the podcast relatively intact. It won't be as long as a normal episode, but in any case, this was a lot of fun. I hope everybody listening enjoyed the answers, and thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We got a lot of questions, so I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the variety in the questions too. That was nice. But yeah, shout out to you again, Sarah. Thank you for all that you do, all the support that you provide to me and to the community, and we're all looking forward to what you'll post next. But in the meantime, appreciate you being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me yet again.
All right. And a big thank you to Sarah again for interviewing me. That was a lot of fun. I'll be flying back home while you're listening to this, but let's wrap up by talking about next week on Substack. So over the weekend, I'm going to post a first look at Flash Fiction February, which is starting very soon. If you enjoyed my prior writing challenges, you're going to love this one. I've got some really cool stuff planned, and of course, Lord Devereaux will be back to help me host. Next week, we'll also bring back our usual weekly threads like our shoutouts on Tuesday, the weekly writing discussion on Wednesday, and so on. Wish me luck on this business trip. I'm recording before I fly out. And as always, I'm wishing you all a safe and productive week. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.
There has got to be something in here.
Finton, what are you doing?
What does it look like? I'm searching Bradley's office for his dark secret while he's out of town.
What are you talking about?
There's no way he does this all by himself. He's hiding something, and I'm going to find it. Then, when I take him down, I'll finally be able to launch the Devine podcast.
You're not going to find anything.
Oh, really? Then how do you explain this?
That's a lava lamp.
Right, but it's weird, isn't it?
No, it's not. Finton, you need to get out of here. Now!
Oh, fine. But I'm still convinced he's up to something.